Hi, transformational speakers. Erin Lohman-Jack here, and today we're going to be talking about storytelling and really deeply connecting with your audience. So, one of the things about storytelling, it is the best tool for teaching anything that we're here to learn. So, if you think back, some of the main things we were taught in school came from stories, right? You can always look at the values that came from the Big Bad Wolf, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Right? We always have all of these things that taught us values and characters based on stories. And so that's why it's important for you to also tell your story as a part of illustrating what your point is, what your value is, what you're here to share with them. So that it helps them remember it. Because what neuropsychologists say is 22% more will be remembered by stories. So make sure that you're telling stories in all of your talks. So this is the way we deeply connect. It's also where people don't just want to hear how you made $1 million. They want to know how you made it through all of the things that you had to go through. Because everybody wants to be the hero. Everybody likes to cheer for the hero. Everyone likes to get behind the hero. So it's important in using storytelling is to let the audience choose you. And you want them to choose you over and over and over again, because at the end, when you have an offer, you want them to choose you again. So when you build these stories, I want you to think about building these stories for the audience, for them. What's in it for them? What's so important for them? Because I could tell you a story about how I woke up this morning, how I got in the shower, and I could go through details of the list of tasks that I did. But when you tell a really good story, you get people to unlock their story. And so that's one of the things that I talk about. When you want them to choose you, you gotta be the David and Goliath. You gotta paint the picture like it was the toughest thing you went through. The struggle to the triumph, right? That's what we all wanna hear. When we watch the Olympics, what do we watch? We listen for the stories and we cheer for the underdogs. We always want the underdogs to win. We want someone with a tough story. Now, if someone was like, oh, my parents were both athletes, I've been an athlete my whole life, it's always been easy, they don't tell those stories. They pick the stories where people had the biggest triumph, right? So I want you to think about your stories. And in this, on the downloads in this week, you will find a list of 20 things that can kind of get your stories going for you. So thinking about different stories for yourself. So that's one thing. And I want you to just really think about your character as you're building that. So as your stories, you want to show the audience the character that you have. Don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this. So human needs and the psychology of connection. So my background being that I went to school to be a therapist, I have so much to offer around why storytelling and why, when you're speaking, sharing the vulnerability and sharing some of these things are so important. So we're going to talk about the psychology of connection. As humans, we all want to be connected. So one of the first things I want you to think about is that you want them to know, like, and trust you, right? So when you first start talking, I want you to start talking so that they see that you have credibility in your field, right? They're going to be searching for that to kind of poke holes in it in a way. So you have to just show them who you are and show them how you're the expert in this industry, whether you've gotten the results or your clients have gotten the results. You have helped somebody do what you're asking the audience to do with you, right? So connection is created by sharing yourself and bringing them into you. So that's what I talked about, the details of the day or the experience. So if I shared the same story in the morning, not just the list of details, I could be like, man, I woke up this morning and before I put my feet on the floor, I thought, man, I have so much to do today. Where do I want to contribute? Should I spend more time with my family? All of those things are way different story than I got up, put my feet on the floor, walked into the bathroom, took a shower, brushed my teeth. So thinking about those things, the experience that you're getting through with people. And when you tell your story, you actually unlock the audience's story. Now let me explain how that works. First of all, neuropsychologists explain that when we share our secrets, our stories, our values, and our passion, our brain releases oxytocin. And that's essential in building significant relationships with others. By sharing with others how how you feel and what was going on for you, they feel like you're bringing them into your inner circle. And when you do that, they feel as if they're already your good friend because you're comfortable enough to share it. And what that happens for them is their oxytocin gets released. Now you're bonded. And when you're bonded, that's when you build the know, like, and trust. So that's the psychology part of it. But let's talk about how we deeply connect as people. We really do share a lot of stories throughout the day. But when you have a really good friend and they say their dad passes away, you dig deep for a story that could relate you with them and what they're feeling. So it's really important for you to think about your audience as a good friend, because that builds the know, like, and trust, right? So it's really important to start building that. So when I tell you a story, maybe you have the same story. Maybe your dad died too. And so you explain your story. And when I explain my story about my father passing, I like to share all the details of what came up for me when he passed. What was I thinking about? Not just in the sadness and the grief, but all the things in his life that really meant something to me. Things that I could hold on to and tuck away. And so when I talk about those things, all of a sudden you start thinking about your stories with your dad. If I start talking about how my dad and I used to adventure out and we would find a road, we didn't know where it went, and we would just drive. And the best part was we never knew where we were going to go. And sometimes we'd find cool little fishing spots. I remember one time we found a big dam, and we'd always took our dog with us, and we had so much fun because we would have picnics and really enjoy, just being together. And so what I love is that when I tell those kinds of stories, you're thinking about going out with your dad, or maybe it was the father figure in your life, or your grandfather, but you're no longer thinking about my dad, Bob Lohman. You're thinking about yours. And that's the key about really good storytelling, is that all of a sudden you unlock a part of someone in the audience they didn't even know you had permission to unlock. And when they're in their stories, they think, oh my gosh, she knows exactly what I'm going through, so she's my person. That's when they choose you. Because we all want to be a part of a tribe. What I wanted to talk about is the deep connection. So we all want to belong a part of a tribe. So one of the first things I do in my talks is I always start with a question. This brings everyone in the room present, but also it shows all of them third-party validation that we're all in it together. So if I start my talk with, how many of you in here have a message you want to create a movement with? And I say, that's right. That's so awesome. I'm so excited to be here because that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want you to bring that audience together by asking them a question. That makes it about them. You can gauge the audience. You pretty much know who your audience is. Well, you should. You should have done this research if you're speaking on who you're speaking to. But this way, at least you know that we're all in it together and the majority has this. And then if you see if maybe no one raises their hand, then maybe you could switch right on the fly. So if I was talking to an audience where I thought there were a lot of people who wanted to speak and there ended up not being those people, I would really shift on a dime. Okay, how many of you have a story in your heart that you know could help someone else? Well, of course everyone does that. Who in here struggled through something? Who in here has, had a major triumph, right? So now, even though they didn't feel like they wanted to create a movement with their message, I've enrolled them and we're all in it again, right? So that's how we want to belong to a tribe. And then here's one of the things that I get asked a lot by my clients. What stories should I tell and what should I not tell? Now this is important because a lot of us are scared to share some of our vulnerability stories because we're afraid it's going to take away our credibility. And that's not necessarily true at all. It actually builds that with the other people in the room. However, there's one caveat. If you have not healed your story, don't tell it. Not till you get over that hump, right? To the light to the end of the tunnel. You do not tell the story that you're currently involved in. And let me show you how. When I tell the story, years and years ago when I first started my business, we were faced with eviction. And it was devastating, and it was a defining moment in my business where everything shifted. But if I was still in it, I would be up in front of the room feeling the emotions, Like, oh my gosh, we're facing eviction. Now you don't want to buy from me, or the credibility is now lost because I can't hold it together. I might not have my life together, and now that's what you hear. And it's very selfish for us as a speaker to take your audience there to the depths and not have the route out. I want you to really think about that. It's really selfish for us to take someone into the depths and not be able to bring them back out. Because in good storytelling, you'll tell the story. I was faced with eviction, it was really painful, it was really hard, it made everything shift, and at that moment I made a decision, a defining decision that changed everything. And now look at me, I've grown here, right? So now they get to go in the valley, but they get to go to the top of the mountain as well. So it's important that if you have not healed that story, don't tell it. Tell all the other stories you want, but until you do the work to heal that, that is no longer on the table, all right? But when you do heal that story, those are always the most powerful because it meant so much to you and it was so, emotional and vulnerable that those will be great stories, but not yet. All right, so those are the great stories to tell. And then make sure it's not about, like I always say, it's not about you, it's about them. So when you're going into these stories, try not to use as many I's. The best and most powerful statement you can ever say is, you know how, you know when, throw it back to them. So you know when you feel like you're so angry, you want to punch someone and your fists are all balled up and you have this heat in your chest. Now, I was really angry. I had my fist balled up. I was so wanting to fight someone. My chest was on fire. So see, there's a difference. If you throw it to the audience, it feels like a conversation. When speaking, it shouldn't be a monologue. It should be a dialogue. Even if the audience can't talk back to you, you want them to interact. You want them to feel like you're having a conversation, like you're having a glass of wine with your friends sitting around the table. So having those things where you're bouncing it back to the audience makes them feel like you're engaging them. So try to eliminate as many I's as possible and just start the sentence without I thought. And just go into the thought, right? So think about that when you're writing up your talk. The next part is the most 3 powerful questions I always say you should go into when describing, let me just move this. When describing your story. So here's what happens. The one thing that all of us as humans have is thoughts, feelings, and how we experience things in our physical body. Regardless of your age, demographic, sex, whatever, job description, doesn't matter. When you talk about the things that all humans experience. So these are the 3 things that are most important. So when we think about what was I thinking? So if you're telling a story, so let's say, I'll go back to the eviction story. In that moment, I was thinking, oh my gosh, what was I thinking getting into this business? What was I thinking I was good enough? What was I thinking that I was doing enough to get enough clients to pay the bills? That was what I was thinking. You can interchange that and what I was feeling emotionally. I was feeling not enough. I was feeling bad. I was feeling like a fool. I was feeling devastated because now I'm letting down my family. So that was what I was feeling. And then if you talk about what you're experiencing physically, as we just talked about anger, right? We all know what anger feels like. But let's talk about like sadness, depression. Let's talk about not wanting to get out of bed, pull the covers over your head. You feel like there's an elephant sitting on your chest and at any moment you can bust out in tears. You just feel like, why am I even here? We've all had those experiences. Even if my story of eviction, you've never experienced that, you will have those feelings somewhere in your life. And you'll be in that story, so it doesn't even matter if it's relating to my eviction story. I hope that makes sense. So the things that I want you to think about as humans, here are our biggest things that we always struggle with across the board. We've all felt not good enough. We've all felt not loved. We've all felt rejected, felt like a fool, stupid, left out, heartbroken, failure. Now these are all the negative things, okay? Because we're talking about a story that has that, remember, hero's journey. So these are all the things that as humans we really struggle with. And as a psychologist, or when I was going to be a psychologist, these were the things that most people came in for therapy around. The deep-seated under all of it were these things. So if you can use these in your stories about thinking or feeling, and what I always say is to use both. And here's why. Most men will not talk about their feelings. But if you ask them what they're thinking, they have a lot to say. So when my husband experienced a death in his family and I said, "How are you feeling, honey?" He's like, "I don't know how I feel." So I thought, let me use my own work. "What are you thinking?" And he started talking. And of course it was about feelings, that in his mind it was thinking. So men usually like to think of, to go into the word thinking, and women usually resonate with feeling. So if you have a split audience, you want to use both. Plus, if you are, even if you're speaking to just women, some women are more feeling sensitive and some are more thinking. So this would be a really good way of getting everyone in the room connected. All right? And everyone knows what we're feeling experientially in our bodies, because we all have bodies. We all have things that go on in our bodies. When we have a pain, we're sore. We know what it feels like in our body. And most of our emotions are felt in our body. So this is important. You know, even like if you're talking about when you crashed your car and how bad your head hurt, right? You were bleeding from your head and it hurt, right? Those are things we've all somehow experienced. So these are all important things for humans who are experiencing these things, right? So this is a good part of the storytelling. And then let's talk about crafting your talk. So we talked at the beginning about bringing your audience together. How many of you had this experience? And then what I want you to do is I want you to go into the next thing. It's great, because that's what we're going to be talking about today, right? So if I said, how many of you in here have a message you want to create a movement with? I'm like, awesome. That's awesome, because that's exactly what we're going to go talk about today. How do you do that, right? So then you tell them what you're going to be talking about. It was as easy as one sentence. Then you want to pick out the three points. Now, this is what you would want to do for a 20 to 30 minute talk. If you have more time, you would put more points in, or more stories, or go deeper in your stories. But let's just do a 25 minute talk, because that's pretty easy across the board. Most networking groups, places you're going to speak, they give you about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, okay? So then you go over the 3 points, and this is where you want to talk about the point. So let's say the point of today's discussion is about psychology and deep connecting. Then I'm going to use a story about how that's important, right? And then I'm going to seed how I work with people and the results they've gotten. So if I said, today we're going to talk about how to create a movement with your message. Number 1 is about storytelling. And then I would say, deep storytelling looks like this. And I would tell a story. And then I would say, and when I've worked with my speakers and people I've worked with on their storytelling, here's the results that they've gotten. They've increased their sales, they've increased their conversions at the end, because they've built more than know, like, and trust. So that's the only piece, that's the middle part, right? And then you want to shift into your offer. We already did your offer in the weeks before, but now it's time to think about going back when you're thinking about this as your speech. Okay, you know who your audience is and you know what your offer is. So you know kind of where you're taking these people to, which is your offer. So in your talk, you're going to be doing those things. So this is where you shift into your offer. And when you shift into your offer, this is where a lot of people get all nervous and weird and freak out. Their energy changes. And when that happens on stage, people check out. The reason they check out is because there's an incongruence with what you just were teaching, which you're an expert in, and then what you're offering, which is to go deeper in that. So why are you not so confident all of a sudden? It's going to throw them off. So this is the easiest way to transition into an offer. I tell you all about how important it is in a talk to do these 3 things, and then I say, and that's why I created the Transformational Speakers Academy. So that's the easiest way to just slowly just talk about your last story and then transition into the offer. And then what you want to talk about is who is it for, who is it not for. That's really important stuff to talk about. You want to go over some testimonials about who you've gotten results for and how important those have been. And then what you also want to do is you want to go and you want to talk about in here, you want to have like a limiter, like, okay, I'm only taking 15 people, I'm only taking 10 people, because people need to have urgency. And so sometimes we have to create that. Now, I don't want this to be like the sham wow. There's only 5 left and you can only, don't be like that. Just say, you know, I want to honor your time and mine. So what I really want to do is I have an opportunity to help 5 people. And today, those people, whoever the first 5 people are that come up to my table, will get this special offer. And then what I also want you to do is I want you to give them, you know, till the end of the day, till whenever your talk is over. And then if someone comes up to you and says, hey, I really want to do this, can we negotiate that? That's where I let them fill out the order form and say, don't run until. And then I call them and have a conversation. But I really want you to lock it in right then and there, because your offer is so important that they have to have that limiter and you have to be in alignment with that and be in integrity. Okay, and so that's your call to action, right? So your call to action is, and if you really think this is great, you know, some of the things, forget this part. Let me just go back a minute. When you're giving a talk, I also want you to think what's in it for at the end for you. So yes, you're gonna get more people maybe signed up for maybe, let's say, coaching, right? But if you want to get everyone on your email list, why not say, hey, I know that you guys are all taking notes and you really want to get all this information. How about I just send out this to all of you? If you put your name in the bowl I'm passing around, or whatever it is, the hat, if you put your card in there, I would be happy to send you all of the slides from my talk today. And I'll put you on my email list. Now, if that's not what you want, if you don't want to be put on my email list, just fold the corner of your card and I will just make sure I send this PowerPoint to you. And so then you're still getting all of those and you're building your list, but you're getting their permission to put them on your email list. Now, it's not okay to just put them on your email list, but that is one way you can get, you know, some of the people to sign up, some of the people their email, so you can continue to build the know, like, and trust for the future sale. And then, you know, whatever else kind of offers you want. But I think that's always the great way. You have 2 opportunities that you can build and you can close some deals, right? Some you'll close there, some you'll close later, right? So now I want you to, after you do your call to action, I want you to tie in all the concepts again. So the main parts we talked about today were storytelling, we talked about the human connection, and we talked about how to create a movement with your message. And here's the biggest part. At the very end, you gotta land this. And what I wrote here was the first 15 and the last 15%. When you're writing your talk, I want you to think about this. As a pilot takes off the runway, it's the first 15% that's the most important. Then you got cruising altitude, which is right in here, the cruising altitude. Then you gotta land the last 15%, because that's what really people will remember, is the first 15% and the last 15% and how you made them feel in those moments. That's what's gonna lock them in, and that's what's gonna convert your sales. So when you write out your talk, I really, really want you to think about that. Even if you write it all out and then go back and say, okay, how powerful is my first 15% and how powerful is my last 15%? After that, you got it made. This is the easiest way to really craft the talk, and every time someone sends me their talk, I make sure I go through all of this and make sure that all of those storytelling pieces are in there, all those questions about how I felt, what was I thinking, what was I experiencing, all those need to be descriptors in there, and make sure that it really lands with everyone in the audience. So today, you get to go out there and start crafting your talk.